Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1544B and today's date is April 13th, 2018, and the title of the episode is The Strategy is Set, Strike Group on its way, Trust the Plan. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, it looks like the deep state, they are becoming very, very desperate, especially with this raid on Trump's attorney Cohen's office, which is an attack on attorney-client privileges, had nothing to do with Russian collusion whatsoever. And this just shows you that the investigation has hit a roadblock. They don't know where to go, and they're just trying to do whatever they possibly can to force Trump's hand. And we could see that Trump kind of fired back and sent Mueller a message by issuing a pardon for George W. Bush staffer Scooter Libby. And Libby was himself unfairly targeted by special counsel Patrick Fitzgerald, who was coincidentally appointed by James Comey in 2003 to investigate the leak of the name of then CIA employee Valerie Plame. Libby was later prosecuted and convicted of lying despite findings that he himself was not responsible for leaking Plame's identity. False testimony was coerced by James Comey's friend, Patrick Fitzgerald, and Comey was part of the team to destroy the Vice President of the United States, and it didn't happen. Some say he was railroaded, and this is Scooter Libby, largely because of his association with the Bush White House. And the involvement of Comey is striking in its parallel to the ongoing investigation by special counsel Robert Mueller. Trump has repeatedly characterized the sprawling investigation as a witch hunt, and it looks like Mueller is completely off the track of finding out if Trump colluded with Russia. And I think Mueller has figured out, and probably already known for a very long time, there's never been any type of Russian collusion. And now his mission has changed. And you can see right now by him doing all this other stuff, it has gone way off the track of investigating Russian collusion. Now we see the deep state, they have not given up at all with North Korea. While they can't go down the path of nuclear weapons because Kim Jong-un already had the peace talks with President Trump, with Xi Jinping, with Putin in the Forbidden City. Even though they're setting up a summit, everything else was done in the background. That's all for show that's coming up now. And this is why when there's a military drill going on, which is still going on, Kim Jong-un has said absolutely nothing. They haven't fired a missile, tested a nuclear weapon, and they're talking about denuclearization. But the deep state, they're pushing another angle. And from intelligence reports, documents obtained by Foreign Policy from the Department of Homeland Security issued in December last year indicate that advanced persistent threat actors are using newly discovered destructive malware that shares a number of similarities to the malware that was used with the Sony attack. Now, what they're doing is they're trying to link this to North Korea. Now, we know with the Sony Entertainment, this was not North Korea. They could care less about that movie that came out that went absolutely nowhere. This was a disgruntled employee that did the attack on Sony. It had nothing to do with North Korea. But, a couple days later, they said it was North Korea because they needed to point a finger, and we know what they wanted to do. They were building a case of why we would have to invade North Korea eventually. So what they're doing right now is they're trying to make a case of why North Korea is going to hit the power infrastructure, going to hit the financial institutions, and they're building this up because they can't use the nuclear angle anymore. That's completely out. Now, in Syria, it looks like Russia is coming out and they are hitting this chemical attack strong and hard, and they're saying, listen, we have irrefutable data that the incident in Duma was staged by the intelligence services of a foreign state pushing a Russia-phobic campaign. This is coming from Sergei Lavrov. Now, he is pointing towards the UK, saying that they are the ones that pushed this entire staged event. Now, we need to remember, as soon as Trump said we're going to be pulling the troops out of there, all of a sudden we had this false flag. Now, we know that Russia also broadcasted that the White Helmets were preparing to push a false flag. So it really wasn't a coincidence. This was completely planned, and when they heard troops coming out of Syria, they realized they needed to do something to keep the troops there and to continue the war in Syria and maybe even escalate it. Well, during this time, the paid mercenaries, the terrorists in Syria, they were instructed to launch an all-out offensive in Syria once the bombs started to drop. So this was the plan. Have the false flag, say it was Assad, that he's the one who caused the chemical attack that killed all these individuals, which really didn't happen. The United States was going to launch a strike into Syria. The targets were going to be picked by the deep state where they wanted them to go, and they were going to mount a major offensive to try to gain territory, try to push the whole mission forward, and maybe get rid of Assad all at the same time. But the problem is, Trump didn't play along. He talked about striking, he called Assad an animal, and then he kind of backed off. And there's a reason why he did all this, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But we're starting to realize that other European countries are saying that we don't want to get involved in this. Germany is saying, listen, we don't want to start a war with Russia. Again, Russia does supply a lot of their gas. And they're saying, you know something? We're refusing to launch any type of strike at Russia or Syria at this time. We also see Italy is saying the same thing. Yeah, you know what? We're not going to take part in any military action against President Assad. Greece, Cyprus, they're saying the same exact thing. None of these countries are joining in. Remember, it's the UK and France with Macron. Macron is saying that, yeah, we have irrefutable evidence that it was Assad. Well, present the evidence then. If you have it, show the world your evidence and let us dissect it to see if it holds true. Now, if you notice, the UK, they're having this whole problem with their Skripal poisoning thing completely falling apart, and it does make sense that they might have orchestrated this entire thing. We see Macron, well, he's doing many different things in his country, and the people are not going along with it. Remember, he is a Rothschild pick to run the country. They put him into place, and we see that he needs to boost his ratings right now, and this is why he's pushing this very, very hard. Sweden right now is preparing a new draft for the UN Security Council resolution on Syria. They want an investigative mechanism and an international mission that will look into reports of chemical stockpiles in Syria to see who actually has the chemical stockpiles. Remember, back in 2013, 2014, the OPCW went in and removed the chemical weapons. The United States signed off, Russia signed off, Syria signed off, and there were supposed to be no chemical weapons in there. And Sweden right now is saying we need to have an investigative body go into Syria and finally look at all this stuff of what is going on there. Now, we see that the OPCW, they are headed to Syria. We see right now that the Syrian official, they've granted them visas. They granted 4 of them to 4 individuals of the OPCW to go into Duma and to inspect. And Russia, they are guarding the area, making sure that no one tries to bomb it, no one tampers with it, so the OPCW can go in there and they can investigate what really happened. Now, the OPCW, they're saying that we are not going to disclose details of its experts' work in Syria for security reasons. Russia, Syria, they're going to protect the OPCW workers. They're going to make sure nothing happens to them. And they went on to say that we are unable to share operational details. This policy exists to preserve the integrity of the investigatory process and its results, as well as to ensure the safety and security of the OPCW experts and personnel involved. The policy applies to dates of the experts, arrival, departure, their numbers, routes, and actions. All parties are asked to respect the confidentiality parameters required for a rigorous and unimpeded investigation. Now, they're doing this on purpose, so countries or individuals in the UN don't come out and say, we have the information, it's definitely Assad. They want everything under tight security, so no country comes out and starts saying that this is true, that's not true, and going on. They want everyone to wait for the final report. Now, the Pentagon, they're saying that, yeah, we're assessing the intelligence. We need to prove that Assad conducted the chemical attacks. And at this time, we don't have any evidence whatsoever that Assad did anything. We're relying on social media. So basically, the United States government is relying on social media for their intelligence. That doesn't make any. We need to get real evidence. We need people on the ground. We need soil samples. We need to talk to people. We need the link between the chemical attack and whoever did it, if there was even a chemical attack. So we see right now that Mattis is saying there is no evidence whatsoever. They don't have any evidence of chlorine or sarin or anything else, and there's nothing there at this point. So this is why we have the OPCW going in there. Russia has already looked at the area. They already spoken to a few people, and everyone seems a little confused because the doctors in the hospitals, they haven't treated anyone. They haven't seen any dead bodies. They haven't seen any signs of chemical substances. So things are a little strange in Syria, which once again tells us that there's no way the United States, the UK, France knows anything because they don't have investigators on the ground. So how do they know this? That it's absolutely Russia and Syria. We see there's a second U.S. Tomahawk capable destroyer entering the Mediterranean. It is the USS Winston Churchill, and they're saying that this was launched April 5th for routine deployment for different drills in the Mediterranean. And once again, I believe that all of this is being set up for a specific reason. And I don't believe the reason is to go to World War III or to have war with Russia, to remove Assad. I believe this is a completely different strategy, which we're going to discuss in just a moment. But we need to remember that the Truman strike group that is headed towards Syria is going to take 6 to 7 days approximately to cross the Atlantic at 30 knots. I mean, they can bump this up, but that's on average. And it's going to take another 3 to 4 days to basically go through the Mediterranean and arrive at Syria. So this buys Trump some time and those people working with him some time to let the investigators do their job and to hold everyone off while Trump plays with the corporate media, with the deep state, saying that he's going to strike. Now, he did tweet, and why did he make this statement? He never said when an attack on Syria would take place. Could be very soon or not soon at all. So he's saying that there could be an attack or maybe no attacks at all. Now let's think about this for a second. We discussed the strategy before, but let's take this a little bit further now. Let's say Trump decides to strike Syria. What would be the benefit of the strike? Syria has allegedly moved all assets to Russian bases. So most of these air bases and stuff, they're probably empty. Just like the last time he fired the Tomahawk missiles, Russia electronically jammed a lot of them, shot them down, and it really did no damage to the air base. It was evacuated, and it was opened up an hour later, and planes were taken off. Of course, they came out and they said back then that we got the chemical stockpiles, and we stopped Assad from using the chemical weapon once again, which was not true at all. So if we strike these air bases, they're empty. Are they going to use the same argument once again? Because the argument didn't work the last time, because what they're saying, and if we believe their story, Assad used chemical weapons again. So the strike really adds no benefit. Attacking a Russian base, well, that would be a complete disaster. That would kick off World War III, because now you're bringing Russia into this. Plus, if you're attacking the Syrian army or the Russian forces, again, that's World War III and most likely an impeachment for Trump without getting congressional approval. So what would be the benefit of all this? Trump will go down as being the president that started World War III, maybe move into a nuclear war. What would be the benefit? There is no benefit to any of this. It makes no sense whatsoever. Plus, we need to understand that more and more military assets are being brought into Syria. The whole entire country is blanketed with the S-300, S-400 missile system, the electronic jamming, and most likely they reprogrammed everything to basically go after anything that enters the airspace. So once again, this whole area is completely protected. Now maybe people are saying, well, we're going to strike the area where the false flag occurred. Well, if you were going to do that, you probably should have done that a long time ago, because now Russia's already been there. They've taken pictures. They've taken samples. The OPCW, they're on their way. And Russia has already secured the area. So that makes no sense either. So what is Trump planning to do here? It seems like he's waiting for evidence. Evidence from the OPCW. Now, why didn't he just agree with Russia? That would have been easy. Oh, Russia's right. It is a false flag. We have the information, because then the corporate media would go and say, hey, see, he's working with Russia. He agrees with them. He's working with Putin. That's why he's staying away from that. So he's waiting for an independent body, the OPCW. He knew that Russia would veto the UN draft, and Putin and Trump already discussed this, that the OPCW would go into Syria and do a real investigation under a security umbrella, so no information gets out. And maybe the OPCW comes back with inconclusive evidence. We can't make heads or tail. We don't know if it's Assad. We don't know if it's rebels. We have no clue. Well, Trump is off the hook. There might be no evidence of a chemical attack at all, where they say this was staged. We have no evidence of any chemicals. There are no bodies. There is absolutely nothing. Or they can say it was the terrorists. It was the paid mercenaries. They're the ones who created this staged event, this false flag. They used chemicals and they killed all these. Or the other one is this was a staged event by the White Helmets. All of this gives Trump an exit plan. What does this mean? Well, the USS Truman strike group will be there around April 22nd, maybe the beginning of May. All depends on the weather and everything else and how fast they're going. Let's say they get there by April 22nd or around that time. Now, we need to go to what James Mattis said today, because this is very important. He was asked a question whether there is sufficient evidence to accuse the Syrian government of using chemical agents in Douma. His response to this was the following, that the intelligence on the alleged use of chemical weapons in Syria, in the Douma region, is still in progress. To quote him, "We're still assessing the intelligence, ourselves and our allies. We're still working on them." This is what he said when they asked him the question. So the United States right now is not saying it's Assad. They're still working through this and looking at the evidence. And we reported just before that most of the evidence is coming from social media. I think what Trump, Mattis, the Patriots, what they're waiting for the report to show that Assad didn't do this, it was inconclusive, or it was the rebels. This then will allow Trump to say, okay, it wasn't Assad. You know something? I'm removing the troops. There's no reason for our troops to be there. That information was fake, phony, and false, and it's time to get the troops out of there. Now, we need to remember something very important. There were targets that were chosen in Syria, and it wasn't to hit Assad. It wasn't to hit Russia. They were chosen because they were the deep state targets. Who will the fleet be firing at? The paid mercenaries, the deep state army. When Trump decides to withdraw the troops from Syria, the deep state is going to resist, because they need the troops there, because the troops protect the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, the Syrian Democratic Forces, the entire deep state army. Once the troops are evacuated from the country, removed, the deep state, the paid mercenaries, most likely will try to keep them there. because Russia, Syria, and Iran will not fire on all the bases that they created if there are U.S. troops there, which basically sets up a roadblock because they will not get rid of the rest of the terrorist groups if the U.S. soldiers are in place. If Trump removes the U.S. soldiers, well, it's open game on terrorists. Russia, Syria, and Iran can go in and clean up. This is what the deep state is most nervous about. This is why they don't want a report. This is why they want an attack now. Now, they might do something. There might be another false flag to get this war going, because as time goes by and the inspectors start to collect evidence and figure things out, they're going to lose their edge. And this is a very big problem for them. So the ships are being brought in. They're going to have the troops withdrawn from Syria. The deep state is going to try to keep them there. Most likely, the United States will fire missiles if it's necessary, because that's why Trump said we might not. But they'll be firing on the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, all the paid mercenary forces. The ships, most likely, most of them will stay there because the next target is then Iran. The deep state, the proxy forces are in Iran, and they're going to do the same thing that they did in North Korea. They're going to remove those forces in Iran. So all of this is part of the strategy to get the ships in position, to get the troops out of this area, and the whole thing was completely staged. As Q would say, trust the plan. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.